What's up, guys? Today we're answering an email about bitterness. So that's what we're going to talk about next.
If it's Christian, we're talking about it. This is the Mike Charleston Show.
All right, what's up, guys? Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, hey, you get to see the cool shirt that I'm wearing. Not really. Everyone looked at me like, what? There's no cool shirt. Yeah, no cool shirt. But anyway, so yeah, we're going to be answering an email today. So,
well, before we do that,
Chuck,
because I know, one of the things will kind of make this maybe a weekly update type thing. I know y'all we talked about last week, y'all are preparing for a 5K.
5K, schmive. I'm getting bitter towards this.
So how's it going?
It was going fine until like yesterday when we were running and my legs were just hurting. My knee has been bothering me, and but my legs, my muscles were all tight, and I'm like, I don't understand. We're not running that much, and then I woke up this morning kind of sore. But we'll get through it. And this next week scares me because
tomorrow we have been running 9 minutes of 20, and tomorrow it changes to 16.
Yes,
so
not
that'll
really
be a
excited.
Big jump.
Not excited
16.
at all. Yeah, not happy. I think I'm getting bitter towards this situation.
It'll be fine. It's amazing what you can do when you push.
So when is the race?
It is November 16th. I believe.
We got a few weeks to go.
Yeah, maybe I'll do like a little live thing from there and be like, hey, we're getting ready to run. And then 2 hours later.
It's almost over.
Yes. Sarah doesn't like talking when she runs. And
it's not that I don't like talking. I can't talk while I'm running. Like, it's hard to just keep going.
She's in the red zone.
And everybody's like, oh, just run faster. Just do that. Everybody has their opinions
her
of all the things I could do to...
You got to focus, huh?
Yes. So far we haven't listened to music, but I always listen to music when I'm running or something to kind of distract me from the pain of running. And so I think tomorrow we might have to... stick an earbud in. So
I didn't think you had the pain. Your legs hurt.
It's the pain of running. Nothing hurts, but it's just hard to keep running. So
I don't understand. So okay. Anyway,
Mike says it hurts everywhere.
Yeah, it hurts. Muscles ache. Oh man. Okay, so we had an email a couple weeks ago, and we were going to do it on the show, and then we looked at it, and we're like, actually, this would make a good subject.
Yep.
I don't think we've talked about it too much, maybe once in the last 4 years. So might as well talk about it again. So bitterness. Who wants to read the email?
Sarah does.
Okay.
You thought Chuck did?
I think Chuck wants to. Okay. No, I'll read it. It says, hello, I really enjoy listening to the show.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, right away, that's positive.
That's right.
No bitterness.
I don't think you covered this topic before, but here are some questions I have for you. I know someone who is struggling with bitterness towards someone. I don't know what to say or do, and I was wondering what you would say about it. How would you approach someone who is bitter? How would you approach someone who's bitter but doesn't want to be? Thanks.
So yes, and they left her name, but we're not going to say, and because the bitter person might be listening. Anyway, okay, no, but so this is specifically, and we're going to talk about the subject of bitterness, but specifically, she was saying, I know someone who is struggling with bitterness towards someone,
right?
And as we delved into studying this subject, because I was like, we've talked about bitterness before, but as I was really looking into it. I was getting some new insights on bitterness, and it's not just always towards someone. It could be things that are happening to you, and that can grow. All these different things,
circumstances, events,
absolutely
that are bitter.
And most of the time, we think about it as one to another. Like I'm bitter toward that person, and so that was kind of a legitimate question there. And we'll answer that question. I want to know. I know someone who is struggling with bitterness towards them. Hopefully, not towards you, but
hopefully not.
Yeah, but I know. I was asking you off air. And I guess I'm asking you on air. Have I ever struggled with bitterness? And I was like, I don't think I have really struggled with bitterness after I've gotten saved. Beforehand, man, I held grudges. I was bitter. But then Sarah, she wants to correct me on that. And was that not true?
I mean, it's not that I wanted to correct you. I just wondered if that could be kind of creeping in, because I feel like it starts small. It's not a big thing, and it can grow and become.
And this was years ago.
It was.
Right. This was an issue, a relationship, and it had been bugging me for many years. Now, I didn't think about it because the person doesn't live anywhere near me. So every once in a while it would come up, and I would think about it, and then I would get all upset, And so thinking about it, I'm like, yes, maybe I was getting bitter in this situation and I had to end it. I had to just stop it. But
well, because when you talk to somebody and one particular person, every time their name is brought up,
right. How do you feel?
It's not good,
right?
And you hear a lot of anger. You hear a lot of, well, they never, or they, and it's just like,
they never,
maybe.
They always, they.
Yeah. So it just makes you wonder. Like, I don't know if your feelings towards that person are right.
Right.
So.
Right. That is a good indicator.
Yeah.
When someone says Chuck Tate, how does that make you feel?
Yeah.
Hopefully not bitter. No. And you really haven't. You haven't really had bitterness that you can think of.
I can't think of harboring bitterness.
Right.
I know there's been times where I've been hurt by people.
Sure.
And that, breaks down the trust from that person, maybe others as well. So you kind of, there's the issue of trust there that's gone and the relationship's harmed. But looking back, I can't think of something where I really harbored bitterness.
Holding it against them forever and ever. And yeah, well, that's good. That's good. But the difference between that, like a relationship that's been broken and trust needs to be rebuilt, is totally different because it's not like, to forgive means to just let them do whatever they want again. No. The trust has to be rebuilt. Yeah. So that is different than from just because you may not trust someone doesn't mean you're still bitter. Just to say that, Anyway, so Hebrews 12:14-15. I think most people, when they're talking about bitter, this is what they're going to go to, right?
Well, there are only 4 times it's mentioned in the New Testament.
Well, bitterness?
Bitterness, specifically. So this is one of them. It says, follow peace with all men and holiness, without which no man shall see the Lord, looking diligently lest any man fail of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and thereby many be defiled.
That's interesting that many be defiled. Think about that. It spreads, right? It's not just a personal thing.
Yeah.
We sometimes think about it, it's just my issue, but it affects those around you, especially if you are a married couple. And your bitterness is toward each other. And the kids are going to be the ones that are affected if they sense that, they're going to most likely sense that. Yeah. But the other thing here, follow peace with all men. So we get some indication here. Peace is a good thing. And holiness. Holiness. I know people say, well, we're already declared holy. Yes, we are declared righteous and holy in God's eyes, but that's also something that we should pursue. Correct. I want to do these things because it's what God has made me. Without notice, you shall not see the Lord, looking diligently lest any man fail the grace of God. Now, that is interesting. Like, does that mean we're not going to be saved or anything like that? But I think that part of that is what it's talking about, is that is what grace is. Grace is not holding those things against those people. We think about our salvation. Is God holding our sins against us?
Right.
No.
That's not it.
No, thank goodness, right?
Absolutely.
Right. That's called grace. He took our place, and so he's as far as the east is from the west. He's forgotten,
right?
Our transgressions, and so in the same way, when someone harms us, and this is speaking personally. Now, there's going to be other forms of bitterness we're going to be talking about that can grow in our lives, but when someone is personally attacking us or whatever, and we have that bitterness towards them, we're not showing grace if we hold on to that. And I think that's kind of what we're saying here, that we're failing the grace of God, because grace of God is to forgive, is to let it go and not hold it against them. You know what I'm saying? Now, if they're doing something criminal or whatever that needs to be taken care of, that doesn't mean you still can't forgive. It's just like, hey, they need to be held accountable. They can't just keep doing what they're doing, and that's different.
Yeah.
But anyway, okay. So I guess we have to define, like, what is bitterness?
Yep.
Like, what is it? Is it chocolate?
Well, that is bitter.
That's bitter.
I was asking you. We tried. Michael Thornton wanted to do a Passover meal. Walk through what a Passover meal was. I am not a fan of horseradish.
Bitter herbs.
I got a big old dollop of that thing, and my breath was not the same for a while, but it was nasty. And
don't eat the cream. Don't eat the pistachio ice cream.
What do you mean?
It has turned. Oh, come on. Y'all gotta watch Cars.
Oh, I haven't seen. No.
Oh, man.
No.
That's to go back to a movie comment. So, yeah, the pistachio ice cream. It was not pistachio
It was
ice cream.
wasabi or something?
It was wasabi.
Yes.
And he got a big scoop.
It's not good. So I was thinking of like, is there any bitter herbs that we really like? No. So think about it this way, like bitter, to think about food, like chocolate. I love chocolate. Now that's very bitter. If you get 100% chocolate, you need to eat you need a sweetness in there.
Yeah.
So think of it that way, like sweet or bitter. In your life, are you sweet? Or are you bitter? And that's kind of what, no one really wants to be around that bitter and like, man, that's kind of, gives you that funny look on your face. We all like sweet. I know it's very cheap and generic, but okay, so what is bitterness?
Well, bitterness, I like what this one person said. It starts out small. An offense burrows its way into our hearts.
Oh, I thought we were going to leave that one for later.
Oh, okay. Well, I could save it.
I was looking for a definition or what. Okay, anyway, was that where it was? Uh-huh. Okay, go ahead.
An offense burrows its way into our hearts. We replay it in our minds, creating deep ruts that will be hard to build back up. We retell our hurts. And then we decipher the offense as intentional and our offender as full of spite. We look for other reasons, both real or imagined, to dislike our offender. And then with each new piece of information, we form another layer of bitterness. So it just grows and grows
Right.
and grows and grows. And we keep adding to it, and it gets deeper and worse.
Yeah, so I like this definition. I guess it's not really a definition, but it was like kind of an example of what it was. You have like a lot of bullet points here. So when you were reading it to me on the phone, I wasn't expecting.
You didn't see the bullet points.
Right. So carrying hurt and resentment over things said or done years ago, that is textbook bitter, right? Like this has happened, it's gone, and years have gone by, and we're still talking about it. Mm-hmm. We can't let it go.
And that's, I think it's a key point here is if you look at the definition and just what you're saying, who's performing the action? When you're talking about bitterness, who's the one that's replaying it in their minds?
The victim.
Who's the one that's retelling the hurts?
Yes.
Who's the one that's bringing the offense back up and wanting?
Yeah.
It's the person who's carrying the bitterness that's doing that action.
Right.
And it's just adding more poison, a little bit here, a little bit there, and you just add. And in fact, like where was that point where it says? We replay in our minds, creating deep ruts that will be hard to build back and retell our hurts. But there was something about, right there. We decipher the offenses as intentional and our offender as full of spite. So we're now making up things in our mind because it hurt us.
They said this because, and now I've created my own reasons why it was said,
this is why they did this. And so it's not even real at this point sometimes. It's just, it's made up. We don't know.
Right.
But it's real. It's reality in our mind.
In some instances, it's real.
Sure.
There's, actions that took place that could be illegal. There could be some real harm that took place. And, that is something that's difficult to overcome.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I think that, in my mind, when we're talking about bitterness, nothing that you're doing by harboring that bitterness is causing any pain or anything to the person who originally gave you the harm.
Yep.
Nope.
It's doing it to you.
Yeah, and you're reliving it over and over and making it worse by exaggerating it even. Like, I'm not saying it's the offense wasn't exaggerated, but you're assuming their motives. Now you know why they did this. They did this to cause this in my life. It just builds on it. It builds and builds and builds, and so you're just like, I can't forgive.
It cycles and builds, right?
Yeah. And like you were telling me that story of that this person that went to Israel or whatever, and she's like, I can't forgive my mom.
Yeah, I mean, this one was like in her 70s, and she was just like, I won't forgive her. I'll never forgive her for what she did when I was a kid, beating her and her sister or whatever with a broom every day or however often, whatever. But she was just like, I won't forgive her. I can't, and that's we've talked to people like that where, we're talking about decades and decades after whatever offenses have happened. And it's like, I'll never forgive them.
And if you let that happen, you're letting them beat you with that broom all the time because it's hurting. It's not hurting them. She's probably dead,
right?
And it's not. They don't think about it. Actually, in my case, I know for a fact that the person that I was dealing with had no idea.
Yeah.
Had no idea that they offended me.
Right.
And so here I am harboring this, in my life and assuming they'd know. And this is why they knew, this is what they were doing. They knew full well, or they should have known, and then when I was talking about this with them later, it was like, had no clue. Didn't know this was so hurtful, and we just had no idea. So it was like, at that point, it was just kind of like scales fell off and just like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
What am I doing then? They don't even know.
Yeah.
It's killing me. Right. And it's not even, they have no clue. So that is, I like that, those bullet points there.
Like that.
And well, because it does build. It builds and builds. It goes on for years and years, and you think it's gone until that name comes up or that situation comes up, and it's like, ooh, it all comes right back and in force, and it only hurts you. So where does it come from?
Well, normally from a hurt. Something hurt.
Something starts, right?
Yeah.
There's either a situation that comes to us, or a harsh word, or action. In some cases, like you were just talking about, trying to be sensitive to the issue there. There's some things that are done to people that are brutal, and some kind of abuse, in some ways, and that is not the easiest to get over at times.
Right.
But it's imperative. You must, or else it's going to eat you alive, and it's a double whammy. Not only was the physical or emotional stress and hurt on you, it's going to carry on further on, and it hurts. It's a double whammy, and you have to stop that. Yeah. So anyway, what is Proverbs 17:9?
Says, he that covereth a transgression seeketh love, but he that repeateth the matter separateth very friends.
All right, so this is like gossip.
Yeah,
it's normally what it looks like.
Right.
Yeah.
That's gossip, and but we like to repeat things over and over. You know what they said. You know what? Instead of just covering it with love.
Yeah. Well, and I think this isn't necessarily talking about that, but I think even, that's what we do in our minds. Mm-hmm. I replay what this person said or what this person did again and again and again, and it just makes me feel more and more angry, more and more, upset at what they did. And I just keep replaying that. And it's like, well, we know as Christians, is that what we're supposed to be thinking about?
No, it goes back to Philippians 4:8. We're not going to go there yet.
We got that coming.
Okay, it's coming. It's coming. Yep. We're changing the name of the podcast. I'm just telling you, okay? So anyways. I
have this quote. It says, every time we replay someone's sin in our minds, we water the seed of bitterness in our hearts, and it grows.
Yes, and true. I could see this in some people that I know where I'm just like, dude, I thought this was, you keep bringing it back. You keep bringing it up. You keep talking about this. And I'm like, let it go. Just let it go. You can't say that, just that bluntly, but you want to hear them out and try to walk them through that. But it is at some point, you just want to slap them, wake up. Don't do this, man. This is killing you. Okay, so what else do we have here?
So I have, how do you know if you're bitter?
That is a good question, because
a lot of times people don't recognize that they're
deny
bitter.
it, right? No, I'm not bitter. I'm better. So I'm better than that. I'm not bitter. But yet, as I was analyzing myself in that one situation, I didn't think I was really that bitter. I was just like, I'm just holding them accountable. They gotta fess up for what they did, and honestly, when I looked at it, I'm like, no, I'm harboring bitterness there. And so it's not as always clear cut. Sometimes it is. It's pretty obvious, but sometimes it's not. So how do we know if we are bitter?
Well, one of the things we're going to do is we want to see some harm, not necessarily physical harm, but emotional harm, something be played out to the other person who harmed you. Right. You want to see some type of, you want to see some type of them getting a taste of their own medicine.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we slander their reputation. We'll talk about them. We have no problem telling people what they did to us, and saying their names, and telling our side of the stories, and like what they did to us. We have no problem doing that.
Well, I think like what we talk about, I don't think we said this on there but earlier we were talking, anytime that name comes up, the person's name comes up, immediately the feeling, the emotion is there. You can't hide emotion. Right. Emotions happen.
Yeah, and if you say, well, I still love that person. Really? Well, how about I say that person's name and see what you do? Do you avoid that person at all costs?
Right.
You know, we knew many people that in a church situation, you know, like they avoided a certain person as much as possible. They lived in a small town together, and yet they would see each other and they're hiding around, you know, in aisleways. And it's like, what are we doing, man? What are we doing?
Well, I think also maybe if you're thinking about what happened and then you just find yourself justifying what you did and like, well, I'm better. I did this. You spend your time thinking about that person, and you're always justifying your actions or what you said. I'm like,
I mean, every situation is different. Obviously, we don't know everyone's offense. So, like specifically with this question, I don't know the offense at all.
Right.
Obviously, if there was some kind of sexual abuse that was going on, I don't know if I could say it on YouTube anymore without getting banned. But SA and or just any kind of abuse in our lives, that's going to be a little bit different than, you know, someone called me fat, you know, and that really hurt. And I'm like, okay, you know, that's maybe a little easier to get past, hopefully, you know.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
But, or, you know, some kind of action was done. Maybe they betrayed you in some way. That's tough to get over. I get that. But it's good for us to get over some of that stuff. So, her ears fell off. So,
Wow.
Headphones gone.
Okay.
Joshua's either going to have to run in here or you're just going to have to go earless. Okay.
So now to get to the question that was asked in the email, how do we overcome bitterness? What do you do about it?
That is a good question.
I think is one of the ideas. How do you approach them?
Right.
How do we overcome bitterness?
So, man, this is where it gets difficult. So Dr. Sarah's in the
difficult. I mean, I don't know. To me, this is my favorite part because I feel like as Christians and with the Bible, we have hope.
It all goes back to Christ, right?
And we do have answers,
we do.
You know, and
That's
it's not necessarily always easy, but we know what to do.
Right, that's the thing.
And it absolutely works and has to. Otherwise, what are we believing in?
It's a simple answer, but it's hard to do sometimes.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just that simple. You know, I could tell you, here's what you need to do, but it's hard. Like if I just say, well, you need to forgive. Oh, okay. It's not always the easiest thing to do.
Not always.
Because we're harboring that anger, we're harboring that bitterness, we're harboring that resentment, and it kind of makes us feel good in some bizarre way. Yeah. And we can't let it go because for whatever reason we need that. Yeah. And if we do forgive, like what would happen, you know? So that to say just forgive is easy. To do it is a whole nother thing because my pain is my pain. You don't understand my pain. And yet we could always point to Christ and say he forgave. It's our duty to forgive, you know. But anyway, we're jumping way ahead. We're going to Ephesians 4.
Ephesians 4:31-32 says, "Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice, and be ye kind one to another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as God, for Christ's sake, hath forgiven you."
Yes. So there's kind of the opposite there, the answer right there.
Yeah.
And so let all bitterness, wrath, and anger, clamor, all that stuff, evil speaking, that kind of all goes together.
Yeah.
You know, and when you're bitter, you're going to be angry, and wrath and clamor, you know, whatever that is. It's an evil speaking. You know, all these things are. You're talking bad about this person. You're feeling bad. You're all the emotion is negative energy toward this thing.
Right.
And but the answer is put it away from you with all malice and be kind. Okay, so start with kindness. Tender-hearted. Oh man, that's hard. With someone that you may have bitterness towards. Tender-heartedness. Forgiving one another, even as God for Christ. That's the easy part right there to me, is once I realize that Christ has forgiven me for everything that I've done, who am I to... It reminds me of the parable of the guy that, you know, was forgiven much.
Right.
And then he goes and says, "Hey man, you owe me $5. It wasn't really $5, but you know what I mean. And he demands it. And he's like, "Hey, how much did I forgive you? You can't forgive them for that."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Yeah, that I offended a holy God. I deserve death. And yet people are people. They do things. They hurt my feelings. I need to forgive." It is not as easy as we're just making it out to be. But it is that easy.
It becomes really easy when you do realize what you've been forgiven.
Right.
And I just, and I've always been a good person, but I know I've been forgiven much. And when I realize that, I look at what I've been forgiven, it makes it really easy to forgive. It's just like, well,
it should.
For
Christ's sake.
Right. He forgave, and he forgave big time. You know, you want to talk about betrayal. You want to talk about, I mean, what he went through. For me, it's like, okay, well, then who am I to say, well, I'm not going to forgive somebody because they said something that hurt me or did something that
or
hurt
to be
me.
tenderhearted, or
Right.
so tenderhearted. When I think about tenderhearted, it's almost like a forbearing, and so it's like I start to understand their perspective. Now, obviously, if they've done some horrific things, it's hard to understand.
Right.
But in my case, I was like, they don't even remember what was the deal.
Yeah.
They might have been going through a lot, and they were during that time. That they might have just said some offhanded remarks, and because they're under a lot of stress and pressure, do I put myself in their shoes at all? Or do I just quickly judge? Do I just quickly make assumptions that their intentions were always evil and were terrible? Or do I try to put myself in their shoes and try to understand? Do I even try to talk to that person and try to get their perspective of what happened, and what was going on? And that's being kind and being tenderhearted, in my opinion. But and forgiving.
Right.
Well,
that
came back. Yeah, I thought it died too. Trying not to sound harsh.
Yeah.
But this may seem like a little harsh.
Okay, warning.
Okay.
Chuck's going to get harsh.
Bitterness to me is an issue with self-control.
Sure.
Okay. We're commanded and told to take every thought captive.
Yep.
And whenever we're dwelling on thoughts that are continually replaying our mind and bringing up bitterness, we're giving way to Satan and allowing him to be able to attack us.
Yes, no doubt.
Yeah.
And understanding that and gaining that focus is, I think, the first step to realizing how to get past this, because it is a understanding. It's a perspective and grace. To much is given, much is expected. God's given us so much through His Son and through His grace. That's where we get the perspective of being able to begin to seek out that forgiveness.
Yeah.
But as long as we're allowing ourselves to continue to dwell on these thoughts and not thinking on the things that we're going to discuss in a minute, we're giving place to Satan, and he's going to continue to use it to attack us and bring us down.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it.
And you hear people say, well, I can't get these thoughts out of my head. But Philippians 4:13 says, I can do all things through Christ. And is it not something that Christ would want me to do, is to think good thoughts and to not think thoughts of evil and thoughts of harm and thoughts of revenge and thoughts, So I'm like, those are the thoughts He would want us to have. And so we can do that. So when you say you can't, what does that mean?
We want to. Like, that's where we want to hold on to this, because we don't know what it would be like. I mean, I'd have to... I'd have to let it go, but this is all I've ever known, is this anger, this bitterness. And if you take that away from me, almost reminds me of the Count of Monte Cristo, He's like, don't take this away from me. This is all I have. But he had to forgive. And it was, it's not a plug, but anyway. But Philippians 4:8 kind of tells us, I know we probably quote this every
feels
episode.
That way, doesn't it?
It does. It does seem like it. So, but it's true. I mean,
it is true.
Why don't you go ahead and read it again?
Says, and you can quote it with me while you're listening, but finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue and if there be any praise, think on these things.
Well, and I like what you were just pointing on, Philippians 4:13, just a few verses later. I can do all things through Christ. Now, that's not... I can do algebra.
I wish.
I know that's not true. I can do all things, and that is these kind of things.
I can do what He asked me to do.
Yes. He wants me to think on these things. He wants me to grab hold of every, take every thought captive. And, He wants me to forgive. I can do all those things through Christ, In my own efforts, I'm going to struggle. Yeah. I'm really going to struggle not thinking about some bad things that happened to me or from the outside, but it's with Christ, I can, because He says I can, and I should. So yes. So what about Joseph's example?
Well, I like the story of Joseph.
Yes, it's a
great story. Obviously, it's a picture of Christ.
Job's example too.
Job's a good example, but I mean, Joseph faced very bitter circumstances.
Yes. So that's the other side. We didn't really touch on this one, but so bitterness. We were directing it towards people, but in the Bible, there is a lot of there's three different kinds of bitterness. You didn't really mention that, but it was there's bitterness, there's bitter
words or behaviors, and then there's bitter circumstances, and then there's a bitter heart, which is what we don't want.
So that's what we're kind of talking about, is the bitter heart. But there is bitter circumstances that when Joseph felt bitter circumstances.
Yeah.
Like when we flooded, that was a bitter circumstances.
Yeah.
But we didn't let that affect us at all.
Right.
We were like, okay, this is what it is. In fact, our kids loved it. And so
a grand adventure.
That was a grand adventure. And it was a bitter situation that could have grown in our hearts, but that's an easy one not to worry about. Maybe not. A lot of people thought, like, wow, you went through that pretty good.
There are people in this area that still have a lot of bitterness about that situation.
Katrina is one of those things that brought bitterness, So anyway, Joseph is in a bitter situation.
Bitter circumstances.
Yes.
His brothers hated him, obviously sold him into slavery, and he ends up in prison.
In the mic.
Sorry.
Okay.
Anyway, but we see at the end of his life, he says that what Satan meant for evil, God meant for good.
right.
And
Yes.
you see, he didn't let it turn into bitterness in his heart, that he just trusted God. And even though for many years went by and, he could have become a very angry, resentful person, but you see when he faces his brothers there at the end, he wasn't.
Right.
Like
He could have, he was like, I could take revenge. And he wanted to see if they learned something, but he forgives them. And he knew that God's had a bigger picture in this, a bigger plan.
Right.
And so he didn't really have time to dwell on it, maybe. We don't know. We don't know what he was dwelling on, but he was moving on with life, and he was just trying to survive. He's in prison and in another prison, and he's being elevated, and all of a sudden he's the second most powerful person in the world.
Yeah.
And here's his brothers coming to him humbly. Well, how's he going to react? And he chose to forgive.
Yeah.
And that is our example.
Right.
In those situations, that it's like, yes, now I'm in a position where I can get revenge, and I don't choose it. Now, here's the other fact that we didn't cover, and we were talking about this off air, but Joseph cried out. Job cried out. There's we just covered Lamentations a couple weeks ago or whatever.
Yeah.
God is quite all right with you crying out to Him.
Yes, He is.
And it is a godly thing to get those emotions and say, Lord, this is unjust.
Yeah.
What is going on? And I feel it. Now, we don't want to sit there, but that's why we take it to the Lord and say, this is how I'm feeling. And do something, Lord. Take it from me. And we see a number of Psalms that are like that.
Yeah.
You were just reading one Psalm. Is it 61?
Yeah, Psalm 61, 1-2. Hear my cry, O God, attend unto my prayer. From the end of the earth will I cry unto thee. When my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher than I. And I think that's where many people find themselves when they're, they faced horrible circumstances and horrible things have been done to them. But it's like when your heart is overwhelmed, where do you go? Do you cry out to God? Because you absolutely can, and you should cry out to God
it's a good thing.
Say, God, this hurts. I don't know how to deal with this. But instead of becoming bitter and replaying those things and creating other realities in your mind or whatever, instead just going to God and saying, I don't know what to do with this, but this hurts. And He can help. Yeah,
and that you see David doing that in some ways. He even blames God in some ways, but even in the Psalms, that when he does, like, God, where are you? You're cold to me. You don't hear me. You don't hear my voice, and yet he twists it and turns it back to, but I hope in God.
Yeah.
But he knows. We know where our help is.
That's right.
Yeah.
But there are times where it is okay to take that to the Lord and say, Lord, this hurts.
Yeah.
This is painful.
Sure.
And I don't want to let this grow in bitterness. And that this is a bitter situation. Lord, take it. Take it. And that is healthy. That's good. And that is a good thing to do. And when we don't know what to do, we go to the Lord.
That's right.
And just praise Him.
Yeah.
Praise
And I mean,
Him.
we face a lot of pain. All of us do in different times in our lives, and it's what we do with those things that makes the difference.
Yes,
I mean,
it does.
how many missionary stories have we read where people face just horrible things, and yet you see them forgive. You see them want to go back to those people who brutally, hurt them for years, and they want to go back and share the gospel.
Yep.
And it's like that's the power of the gospel, and that's amazing.
Yep.
It's cool. Do we have anything else then? Bitterness is a big subject. We didn't want to get into the psychological aspect of it. I know there's some definitions that I wanted to go over, but I'm like, we'll leave that out. We'll just go with what the scriptures say. And so it's some of these things. So how do you approach them? You got to do it. What's the verse there in Galatians? Ye who are spiritual, restore such a one, lest you fall in the same temptation. And you can easily get wrapped into other people's drama if you're not careful. but you who are spiritual, it's okay to listen. It's okay to hear him, but, be led of the Spirit and speak words of life in there and say, this isn't healthy for you to be replaying this over and over and over. Cry out to the Lord.
Cry out to God, and it's not about what they did. It's about what's going on in your mind. That's where the battle is right there. Your mind.
So, yeah. All right. Well, I think that'll do it for the subject, and I hope, writer in of emails, I hope that answered your question. If not, just let us know.
How well do you know your Bible?
All right. How well do you know your Bible? This is episode, I have no idea what number we're on now, but this is Ezekiel.
Ezekiel. That's one probably not a lot of people read.
No, I bet you some people will dive into it a little bit, and then as they get into it, they're like, this is weird.
Yeah, well, I just remember that Lydia had a passage in Ezekiel years ago in Bible Bee, and it was from chapter 1.
Chapter 1.
And it was 4 verses, and it was weird.
Hey, man, that's where you start with the throne of God.
Yeah, but we were like, what in the world? And it's like, what does this mean? I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, well, it gets weirder.
It does.
And so a little background information first was that Ezekiel was a priest, or
was going to be a priest.
Right, he was going to be a priest. And so Second Kings covers the story of the first attack on Israel. Mm-hmm. Now, Babylon comes in and they don't actually fight. They just scare them. Mm-hmm. And Israel gives up. And that's when they transition over, I forget which king it was, not Zedekiah, Jehoiachin,
I don't know.
One of those. They take him away, and all the people he chooses to help run whatever. So Ezekiel was one of those that was part of that first group that left. Mm. This isn't the siege that destroys Israel or Jerusalem and the temple. No, this was right before that, like 5 years before that or something like that. And so he's taken away to Babylon. And so he's just sitting there, and he turns 30, and he's supposed to be a priest at that point.
Yep.
And he's not.
He's not.
But he becomes a prophet. And so God calls him right there.
I think he might have preferred to be a priest.
Maybe. I don't. I'm sure he'd want to do whatever God wants him to do. But yeah, so that's the kind of the background of who this guy is, Ezekiel. And so things are going on in Judah and Jerusalem that he's not even a part of. So he's over here in Babylon having these visions and acting out a little weirdly. So part of his prophecies are to do some
strange things.
LARPing. Yeah, he's going to do some live action prophesying. Yeah. And but anyway, we might be jumping a little ahead of ourselves, but that is who Ezekiel is. Yeah. And so kind of like Jeremiah, he was a priest and became a prophet, where he was never a priest. Right. He was supposed to be a priest.
And he kind of bridges the gap between Jeremiah and then Daniel.
Yes.
So.
Yep. So a lot is going on here, and a lot of judgment against Israel, again, from a different point of view in this sense. We got Jeremiah's point of view, and so this is still talking about the same people, but in a different way. So that is Ezekiel. Yeah. And so it's broken down, and how we have this in 4 different sections, basically. Huh?
Yeah, so the first part, chapters 1 through 24, prophesies the ruin of Jerusalem.
Right. That's about chapters 1 through 24.
Right. Then 25 through 32 prophesies of God's judgment on nearby nations.
Nearby nations. And like you were pointing out, if you look on a map, how he starts, it's clockwise.
Right. Yeah, in chapter 25 and 26, he'll go Ammon, then Moab, then Philistia, or the Philistines, and then Tyre inside, and it's like it goes clockwise order. So anyway, had some rhyme and reason to the way he prophesied, I guess.
Yes. It was. I heard one guy was talking about Ezekiel as he's the most specific of all the written prophets of how he wrote the book. And I thought that was very fascinating because I didn't see one, just if you just read it. But if you go deeper and you start digging in, you can start seeing there's some rhyme and reason to what he's doing. Yeah. Obviously, it's all written by God.
Right.
But yeah.
And then chapter 33 is a last call for repentance to Israel.
Yep.
So he wants Israel to repent. And then 34 to 48 are prophecies concerning the future restoration of Israel.
Yes. So it gets a little good at the end.
Yeah.
But that's kind of a pattern we see in a lot of these books, a lot of the prophetic books too. It's a lot of judgment of Israel, a lot of judgment of the nations around it, call to repentance, and then a hope. So that does seem to be like a theme that goes on around the prophets here. But anyway, so Ezekiel is a little bit out there. I mean, Jeremiah was one that a lot of things happened to him, and but Ezekiel did things like he would do like lay on the side for a year and a half or something like that, play with toy soldiers out in the thing. So it was almost like people would want to go see what he was doing. And like someone I was listening to this week on he was almost like as if he was the news broadcast for the people in Babylon, because he would play out things that were going to happen in Jerusalem. He was doing that in Babylon, and then it would happen. And so that was like it was almost like he was on TV or something. He was playing it out before it would happen, and was trying to tell them what was going to happen. I don't understand like how he's going to ask them to repent. I guess the people of Israel in general to repent, because they're in Babylon. Right. These messages, I don't know how they're going to get to Israel until later. And but Jeremiah's over there prophesying, and there we saw how that went. Not very good.
Well. Yeah.
So anyway, what else do we have here?
Well, then there's a big story in there in Ezekiel 37,
oh, yes.
where you have the Valley of Dry Bones, and there are many people out there that want to make this some sort of like coming to life. You're spiritually or whatever, and maybe you could use it like that. But if you look at Ezekiel 37, then afterwards you have 38 and 39, which is this huge prophecy about a war that is to come and likely soon. We're actually seeing all the pieces come together for that to happen. But if you look at 37, it's talking about these bones coming together and forming an army, and it's like that is actually
dry bones.
And he said dry bones, and he actually says this is Israel, this is the house of Israel,
right?
And so we actually just in the last 100 years have seen this come to pass, where Israel has now come back together, and he's brought life, and now they have an army they haven't had for thousands of years. So it's like this is actually happening.
Yeah, but, whether that is specifically talking about that, or is that still yet to come, where Israel needs to be brought back together even more. We're not sure. But we know in 1940, 1948, they were definitely came back as a nation, and now they have their own military. They are back, and kind of messes up people's theology when that happened. But no, that is a good point. And I was listening to someone about this week, and they were kind of saying that they were like, well, there still needs to be a few things that needs to happen for all of Israel. I think he was taking this as more of a spiritual approach, but I'm like, well, yeah, they need to return to God, but I don't think that's going to happen until Jacob's trouble, where they actually do turn back to God. There's some of them that are trying to turn back to God, sure, but they are still a godless country right now, for the most part. And so anyway, but this is, Ezekiel sees visions that are very vivid and very odd, and just like, what in the world? I mean, it starts out in chapter 1. We see basically the throne, or the wings that covers the throne room of God, and then the wheel within the wheel. And then God tells him to do a lot of weird things. So, we say weird, but to him, he's acting out the prophecies of God and what it's going to look like and what the judgments are going to look like. And, you should pay attention to those, So a lot of people want to dismiss Ezekiel as having epilepsy. People don't actually believe the Bible is real. They were like, well, this guy just had epilepsy and he saw things in his own mind and it wasn't of God. Well, a lot of these things did come true, and a lot of these things are yet to come true. Yeah. But the things that he was prophesying about the fall of Israel, Jerusalem, was coming true.
Yeah. Well, and it helps to do a little bit of homework when you're reading, especially like chapter 37, 38, 39.
Right.
Because the countries aren't called the same things that they're called today.
Yeah, that does help. Right.
So when you're seeing Persia and you're like, well, what's
I have
Persia?
no idea.
Persia's Iran today. So
Right.
I'm like, if you don't know that, then you're just like, whatever. But I'm like, if you know what they are, then you're like, wait a minute, this is happening, you know? So anyway.
Yep. No, I see that you have there May 14th, 1948, and that was the day that Israel became a country again.
Right. Yeah, because for thousands of years, people look at, some of these prophecies and they're like, I don't see it happening. Well,
yeah, I mean, that's what, when the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, they just felt like God had abandoned Israel.
Right.
And they were scattered and, all for over 1,000 years. I mean, my goodness. And then God brought them back. And it is neat to see all these things and come to pass. And we're seeing things right now where we're like watching and waiting and like, what does this mean?
Right.
So,
and then I have one verse out of Ezekiel. If you look up top verses, there's a lot. I'm like, I don't know, but
this one everyone loves. This is a good one.
Chapter 36, verse 26 says, "A new heart also will I give you, and a new spirit will I put within you, and I will take away the stony heart out of your flesh, and I will give you an heart of flesh."
Right.
So.
Now, a lot of people like to use that verse, and that's fine. You can use that verse. It's specifically talking about Israel here,
right?
And not us personally, but that is kind of what happened with us too. As a new creature in Christ Jesus, we don't have that heart of stone. But they were so rebellious. I mean, you're looking at the time period of what's going on. It's hard to imagine, God's people with the idolatry that was going on and just the wickedness that was going on inside the temple and all these things that Jeremiah was pointing out, where he was, he got up there and he said, "This is the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord." And yet he goes on, seeing all these abominations, and he said, "I, the Lord, have seen it." And same thing with Ezekiel, like these things God has departed from Jerusalem. And so anyway, it's kind of, it just shows, the hearts of men, like what's going on? Like, would I refuse? Would I rebel? And surely not. That's what we'd all would think. And so no, it's the God's people were in rebellion, and He's going to bring judgment, and we know that He did. He wipes out Jerusalem, basically, and they bring all those people into captivity. But yet there is hope. There is hope. And I think Ezekiel is more talking about, like most prophecies, there's an immediate one and then a futuristic one. Yeah. And we're still waiting for some of these prophecies to play out. So this is a confusing book in some ways. It's hard to understand and hard to read, but there are helps. And if you just, stay in the context of what you're reading and just don't try to make everything apply to today, but just read it in the context. You might have to go back to 2 Kings and
Leviticus.
Yeah, you can go to Leviticus too, but no, you go to 2 Kings where the story is. Remember where we are in the Bible. These are prophecies. Jeremiah was a contemporary. Ezekiel comes on the scene a little later. It was called a little later. And so anyway, that I don't know if you have anything else you want to add about Ezekiel. It's some weird stuff in there, but yeah, that is the book of Ezekiel.
Missionary Stories with Chuck.
All right, Chuck, we need to put numbers on those sounders because it's just like we get the wrong one every time. Anyway, this is the Missionary Story segment. So, Chuck, take it away. What do we got?
All right. So today's story is called "The Tiger is Loose."
The Tiger is Loose. Do we know this missionary?
No.
Okay.
No, this is not a famous missionary. "The tiger cannot possibly escape from the basket," said the sergeant. "Are you sure?" Jack, the missionary pilot, stood beside a small plane. Pushing back his cap, he wiped a trail of sweat from his forehead and looked doubtfully at the huge wicker basket. Inside the basket, which had been made from reeds and strips of bark, crouched a fierce-looking spotted cat. The tiger was really an ocelot, a tawny South American panther. "Oh, si, senor," the Peruvian soldier assured Jack. His white teeth flashed in his swarthy mouth as he grinned. "The tiger cat will be quite safe on your plane. My basket is very strong." Jack was not enthusiastic about having a wild ocelot aboard the plane.
That's what they all say.
That, huh?
Yeah. Nothing's going to happen.
No.
So it starts every story.
It looked pretty mean. He was flying alone on this trip with a cargo of supplies for different mission stations. I'm already carrying 4 live chickens and 2 turtles in a box, Jack mused. This plane's turning into a Noah's Ark. But Jack remembered the mission director's rule. Always cooperate with the government people whenever possible. We're in their country by permission to preach the gospel, so be courteous. Yes, I will take your tiger along and deliver her to your friend, Jack agreed.
That's a good lesson, by the way.
The 2 men loaded the big basket behind a back seat. The plane skims lightly over the river on its pontoons and rose into the air. Jack was flying one of a small fleet of mission planes which soared daily over the most savage, dangerous jungles of South America. Any mistake on his part could bring his plane crashing down to vanish in the trackless expanse of jungle where death awaited in many forms.
What country are we in? Peru?
Peru, I think. Yep.
Okay, Peru.
Yep. So death from many forms: poisonous plants, deadly snakes, man-eating fish with razor-sharp teeth, and head-hunting Indians all lurked in the thick green rainforest.
That doesn't sound pleasant.
No.
Okay.
Before airplanes came to South America, to the South American missions, the missionaries and Bible translators had needed to travel on foot through the treacherous jungle trails or by small boats on the rivers. A trip to the nearest town or doctor might take 10 or 20 days of dangerous travel. But now pilots like Jack took the same trip in an hour. This made things so much easier for the brave missionaries who were risking their lives to bring the gospel to the Indians. Jack whistled happily thinking about this. His hands skillfully held the controls as he peered through the plexiglass windows of the cockpit. 3,000 feet below were the lush jungles of northern Peru, with the strangely black waters of the Nanay River churning through them. Suddenly, a flurry of squawking noises erupted from the seat behind Jack. It sounded just like the noise the chickens had made on his father's farm the time a fox had crept into their hen house late at night.
I know that sound.
Whirling around in his seat, Jack saw the ocelot had escaped.
Oh, of course.
She was climbing over the seat, yellow eyes gleaming as she hungrily looked at the chickens. Grabbing his canteen, Jack threw water at the big cat. Snarling, she slunk back to the luggage compartment.
Don't know if water is going to work.
In just a few moments, though, she started over the seat again. Frantic, the chickens flopped their wings and fought to free their feet from the vines that tied them together. Jack hurled the empty canteen at the cat. He missed, and the ocelot pounced, landing in the seat beside the chickens.
Oh, boy.
Snapping the weed vines around their feet, the panicked chickens exploded in all directions. Their wings beat against the windows and in Jack's face as the ocelot stood up on her hind legs, sharp claws swinging for a drumstick. Feathers flew everywhere. Jack forgot all about flying the airplane and began grabbing for chickens. But it was no use. The ocelot soon had a chicken trapped on the floor under Jack's seat, and he could hear its sharp teeth crunching on flesh and bones.
That's lovely.
The plane was 3,000 feet up in the air, and no help was near. What could Jack do? Would the ocelot be satisfied after her chicken dinner and sleep for a while, or would she decide to hunt for some more meat?
Seconds.
Slash! One tawny foreleg, tipped with steely claws, shot out from under the seat toward Jack. For an instant, the ocelot's claw hooked into the pilot's pants, then tore free. Jack's pounding heart seemed to be squeezing the breath from his lungs. The tiger was hunting him. With all his might, Jack kicked back at his enemy. She yowled a blood-curdling cry of rage that filled the small plane. "Lord, what shall I do? Help me find a place to land," Jack prayed desperately. Looking out the window, he spotted a small settlement by the river below. Jack rolled down the flaps of his plane and began to circle around for a landing. Kicking the cat with his heels every time she reached for his leg, he finally got the plane down to the water. A crowd of dark-skinned men appeared as Jack taxied the plane up to the bank. "Help!" he shouted out the window. "I have a loose tiger cat in here." A dozen men jumped onto the pontoons at the same time, all trying to see into the plane, which began to sink. "Oh, no!" cried Jack. "Not all at once." The men jumped off again, and their leader sent for a coil of rope. Soon the angry ocelot had been lassoed and safely tied up. Sighing with relief, Jack thanked the Peruvians. "Oh, this is nothing," the leader smilingly told Jack. "We're just so glad you landed here. One of my men had a heart attack this morning and may die if we cannot get him to the hospital. Will you take him along to the city?" "Of course I will take him," Jack agreed. "So, the Lord had a purpose in allowing the tiger cat to break loose," Jack mused as he helped lift the sick man into the plane. "God used a snarling ocelot and a scared pilot to get his plane to the right place and save this man's life." Less than 2 hours later, the sick man was safely in the hospital at
Yeah. Okay. Good luck.
Yeah. And I actually listened to these before. Oh, well. Say it and go, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Less than 2 hours later, the sick man was safely in the hospital at Equitas. The Army officer had the ocelot, and Jack was on his way back to the mission at Yarnakakucha.
Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah. I tried. I listened to the pronunciation before I got here, but I forgot. Okay. So Jack the pilot was Jack McGuckin of Wycliffe Bible Translators Jungle Aviation Service. And this incident happened in the 1960s when Jack was one of the first missionary flights in Peru.
How about that?
Yep.
Yeah, we've never heard of Jack. So, well, except for we've read the Missionary Stories before.
Yeah.
He's not one of the more popular, famous.
No, he wouldn't be.
That's kind of why we like these stories.
Yeah,
Just
they're
random missionary stories. So, yeah. Ocelot in the plane. Like, I wouldn't be worried about the chickens. I'd be worried about me. But
I think I would have been grabbing the chickens and throwing them to the ocelot.
that's right. I'll feed them. I don't care. So, yeah, that's a good one. So, cool. All right. Well, thanks, Chuck.
Music with Sarah.
What song do you like?
Alrighty, what song do you like this week? So I was just talking about this with you earlier, and like, what happened to all the older songs? Because this is a newer one. It's not really that new.
Yeah, I think maybe 2017.
2017 in my book, that is pretty new.
I get it,
but it is 7 years old.
Right.
Okay. Anyway,
Well, this one's called "You Know What I Need."
You Know What I Need by Pat Barrett.
I think it's by Pat Barrett, but the version that I have has Pat Barrett, Josh Baldwin, and David Leonard. So, whatever.
Everybody collabing.
Anyway, this one actually is on an album called Happily Hidden. But anyway, go check that one out because it's really pretty. And but I love this song because I find it's very true. It starts with, "Lord, every single day, you know what I need, know what I need, know what I need. The sleepless nights I lie awake, you know what I need, you know what I need, you do." And it makes me think of the hymn, "I Need Thee Every Hour." You know, it's like God does know our needs. And if we acknowledge that, then that's a great place to start. So then the chorus says, "When I close my eyes, it's you. When they're open wide, it's you. As I live and move and breathe, be the air beneath my wings, the ground beneath my feet. All I'll ever need, let everything I say and everything I do lead me back to you."
Yeah, I was thinking about this earlier today, just thinking about other things, and just thinking about, are we just bored? Do we just get bored of God? We just like, I got everything I need, and I'm doing pretty well in my life, and it's just, I don't need to pursue Him because we have Him, and so He's with us, and so what's the pursuit? And I'm just kind of existing now, doing my own thing, and we just kind of bored with God. But that's sad.
That is sad. Well,
Okay, you're just going to plow on.
No, sorry. Well, recently I was talking to somebody and they were talking about things they were going through, and just, in life, things happen, bad things happen, and things don't work out the way you expect them to. And anyway, and then I heard this song shortly after that, and I just started crying, and I was like, it's so true that God knows what we need. And for each of us, it's very different, the things that we're going through and the things that we're thinking about, just like what you were thinking about today,
And even things that are we may not think are good for us, later on we find out that's exactly what I needed.
Right.
That is what I needed.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it at the time. It took me years to figure that out.
Right.
But God knows best, and that's why we need to trust Him.
Right. Well, I think even talking about bitterness today, it's like when you actually can go to God and say, okay, this hurts, this, whatever I've been through, whatever I'm going through right now. But if we go to God, He knows what we need. He knows how to help us. He knows how to comfort us.
Yep.
So, it's a beautiful song, kind of like a prayer, prayer.
Yep.
Kind of like a heart cry.
It's not an anthem song.
No, it's not an anthem song,
cry.
but it's really pretty. And I just feel like, when you put this in your heart and you think about the truth that he does know what we need and we can go to him.
Yep.
I'm like, that's where we need to start.
And what about the other verse?
And then the other verse says, you're the peace for my racing heart. You know what I need. You're the rest for my spinning mind. So, it's just kind of simple things. But, in life, we do just get caught up and just go, and I need this and whatever. And we forget to go to God because he is the one who can answer our prayers and knows what we need.
It's not about this life. This life is great. I appreciate this life,
Yeah.
But we get so caught up at times, and it's like I wonder if we just get bored, and we're like, no, but he is everything that we need, and people can say that, I wake up and I just, it's all about God, but then you look at their day and it was all about them, and I'm like, but God is there's so much more, but anyway,
I love that it says at the end, let everything I say and everything I do lead me back to you. And I think, wow, for everything I say to lead me back to him and everything I do so that people watching, they'll see, wow, everything just points back to Jesus. Like, isn't that where we all should be?
Yeah, that's the point, right? We want to glorify him.
Yeah.
And it's not about us, that's for sure.
Nope.
But I want to glorify him.
The Mike Charleston Show is brought to you by Fellowship of Believers. For more information, go to our website at fellowshipofbelievers.org. Thank you for listening. We hope we have encouraged you to stand strong in the Lord Jesus and grow in him.